Hello, and welcome to the podcast There Are No Good Games, where we discuss our opinions on past, present, and future games, as well as a whole load of other filler to keep us sane while we wait for a good game to play. Let's begin. So, hot take. Role-playing games and simulation games fall under the same bracket of games.
Well, I guess it depends how you define what a role-play game is and what you define as a simulation game.
So I thought about this, right? So take this, I'm trying to think of like two examples that would be really good. So the first one is Sims, right? And then the second one could be like a World of Warcraft game, right? For instance. So you hear me out here. So Sims is more of like a simulation game in which you're trying to replicate real life instances or try and make something as realistic as possible to a degree, right? So it's trying to mimic activities that you'd see in the real world, and it might be able to teach you something, or like fishing or like farming or something like that. But in Sims, it lets you do that sort of stuff, like planting, doing a job, and all that sort of jazz. Role-playing games, hear me out, is a game which players assume the roles of a character in a fictional setting. And I thought this was kind of interesting because I was like, at what point do you draw the line between a role-playing game and a simulation game? Because if we're doing a role-playing game like trying to think of an example, Darkest Dungeon, that's almost like a simulation game of being a dungeon diver in a fantasy world. Like you're simulating that process, right?
I see, but then you could say anything. But then what you're suggesting now, fantasy is again for the element of this would define fantasy as made up. Okay, even though it's based. Well, it depends what type of fantasy you're talking about, because fantasy doesn't necessarily mean medieval fantasy, does it? It could mean space fantasy. Yeah, Japanese, Far Eastern fantasy, whatever it might be. Like it's all very different. But so let's define fantasy as made up or fictional. Then. I guess does a game, just because it has any elements of reality, therefore mean it's a simulation game? Or does a game, because it doesn't have elements of reality, make it a fantasy game?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm trying to work out. At what point do you draw the line between an RPG and a simulation game? So Sims, in my head, is simulation right up until the point where you can start growing stuff and like seeing death and I guess growing using magic for the first time. Like, I don't know at what point you classify Sims as a fantasy game or an RPG to a simulation game. But in the same setting, Fable, the first one, where you have to eat, drink, keep yourself warm, heat yourself up and go adventuring, at what point you draw the line as a RPG and make it more of a simulation game?
See, my definition, this is where I define simulation, is simulation is where we'll call it artificial intelligence, where the AI of the game is making decisions without your interaction, or based off your previous interactions, right? So, for example, in the simulation of Sims, you don't have to actually control your Sims, right? You can make your Sims, you give them the traits, and you can just watch what they do. Now, I don't know if that's exactly like that exciting, because there's a limit to what they do in the Sims. Like your Sim doesn't go pick a job. Like you have to actually go get them a job. But at the same time, in Sims, they have skills, and RPG games also have skills, right? So it depends if you're going to say, okay, well, it's like a Venn diagram, is that here's the RPG, which at the same time, are you not fighting monsters in a world? Are you not simulating being a herbalist, a potion maker? Like technically that's all simulation in some way. The world is alive. It follows a conformed rules. It's simulation. If I designed my own alien species, and I put them into a world, and I just let them get on with it, and I'd program them kind of like, I might give them like pheromones like ants have, I might give them kind of like noise. I can like create random noise, simulate noises being made, and they might follow that and look for food there, whatever it might be. But at the same time, my ants might have, different skills and levels, and that makes them stronger.
Yeah.
And, you know, in real life, ants, you know, they have all this stuff. They have different like rankings, you know, they have general ants and they generally grow bigger. You got the queen ant. You know, all this stuff kind of fits together. So it could be simulation, but also the same as an RPG. So I guess in some way, you could say they're both alike in some way. But
no, it's I guess
it's about the definition, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess that's where you draw the line, because I'm going to take some like interesting examples, and this is kind of like to push out the barrier, right? So as much as you dislike the title of the game, Star Citizen, I think falls more into an RPG/simulation game, while something like F1 is more of a simulation/RPG, right?
You're talking about the like my team bit of F1, not just doing actual racing F1. Sure, okay, I get that. But then, I guess like in some way, you know, we have all these game features that exist, and that could be like gaining levels, or getting items, or it might just be you getting better at the game to defeat something else, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if we think about it, you go off in Dark Souls, okay, and you know, you fight a boss for the first time. You could die for the like just straight there and then, because you don't know what they do, okay. I go into F1 onto a new track that's never done. Okay, Vegas has just been, you know, released in F1 23, because Vegas is a new race this year in real F1. Okay, is that not the same thing? I'm entering into a new boss battle, and I'm likely to crash because I don't know the speeds and the braking points and how to corner. So it's exactly the same thing, but they're very, very different games, right? Yeah. But actually, once we've broken it down to its main pieces, it's about going into the unknown and trying to win.
Is that a simulation or an RPG though?
I don't think it matters. It's not even. I don't even know what to call it. It's just a premise, right? A premise of a game is to go into something and win, right?
Yeah, but isn't that
that's the same thing?
That's the premise of
I'm
life,
not going
right?
to FIFA. No, but that's exactly right. But at the same time, you know, I guess it's every game is, no matter what, whether it's simulation or RPG or whatever label you have, is goal oriented.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how to break it down. And your goal might be to find your lost sister, and that could be a platforming game, okay, where you go across into woods, think like Limbo style, okay.
Yep.
And that's the premise, right?
Yep.
But then at the same time, I'm trying to find you know, Clacton on Sea in Truxin, okay, and so I can go deliver my goods. You know, same premise, very different games.
Yeah.
And so goal, I think once you put it down to it, maybe all these different genres we have are pointless, because at the end of the day, every game boils down to the same thing. There's no original game because they're all goal oriented.
Okay, so
I would love someone to tell me a game that isn't goal oriented.
I was going to say, what you call it? Animal Crossing, to a degree, isn't goal orientated.
Oh, this is where we start going about sandboxes, though, isn't it?
Well, that's what I mean. Like,
at the same time, you're creating your own goals in a sandbox game, though, aren't you? So still, even though you have the element of choice and this theme park type game, you know, where you can do whatever you want. Okay, I'm not actually talking about like a theme park building game. I'm talking about, you know, games are built like theme parks where you go in and you don't know what direction to go. You just go to where you want it.
Yeah.
Okay, what the developers have done. But you create your own goals, and your goal, no matter where you go, is to go have fun then, isn't it? And I'm not saying every game is to have fun, because that's pointless. That's a stupid thing to boil it down to. But every game does have goals, whether you create them, the game creates them, the simulation creates them, or it's what the developers intended.
Yeah, no, I think it's just an interesting one to kind of like call out though, because it's just like when you break it down to that level of like fragmentation, you're basically saying there's no game genres, there are just games.
Well, I think like you can still have, you know, so okay, let's sideline games and talk about films then, okay? Because this is way easier way. Because in some way it's slightly easier to understand a genre of film, because everyone's seen films, and it's very easy to see, you know, the difference between The Conjuring, okay, and the new Barbie film. All right. Yeah. Now both could be defined as horror depending on what your viewpoint of the Barbie film is. Okay, but one, the genre of horror is to basically, whether it's a psychological horror or, it's this jump scare horror, that's very easy to define. Like someone go, oh, that's a horror film. It's scary, right? And yes. Barbie is clearly like a kind of, I mean, I haven't seen it, but it's clearly like a
satire.
Well, I don't know if it's satire, but I guess like the goal of the film is probably like, maybe romance, film. It obviously tells a story. It's dramatized, I guess, in some way. But yeah, I guess in some way, I don't know. What does Rotten Tomatoes say Barbie film is genreized, or IMDb? That's kind of what you go to. And someone a long time ago defined these, what these were, and we kind of follow them. But
yeah, no,
at the same time, the storyline could be very the same. Like at the end of the day, they're trying to find a ghost in The Conjuring, and Barbie's trying to find herself. It's the same thing.
No, I'm trying to think about it because like you brought up an interesting point, because I'm literally looking at like what they classify as a horror film, which is a film that seeks to elicit fear, disgust in its audience, right? And then you have thriller, which is a genre of film with numerous overlapping subgenres, including crime, horror, and detective fiction. And it's meant to.
So it's like a layer. It's a layer, isn't it? Then.
Well, that's what I mean. And it's like it's really weird when you think about it, because you go back to your Venn diagram idea, and a lot of these films can actually intersect one another, but you just choose to pick elements of it, right? So here's a good example. If you're looking at purely definition, so it's meant to elicit fear or disgust. Take The Batman, because I know you've seen that and I've seen that. That I would classify as a superhero film, followed by thriller, because it's about Batman, but it's also like a detective film at the same time, but it has horror-like elements, right?
Yeah, okay.
So at what point do you kind of like categorize stuff and put them in boxes, or should categorization of games and films be a little bit more open context now? Like it should have flavors of X, Y, and Z, but they shouldn't be categorized as different games. Does that make sense?
Well, why do, okay, well then I guess it then comes back to your example now is saying, well, actually films can be multiple genres, and we've given a great example there, of it. Although in some way they all kind of fit around this thriller, right? Which again is like a super genre, let's call it, which has like multiple things underneath it. And that's fine, because even horror itself is like a sub-super genre where you've got psychological horror, gore, you've got all these like mini things, you've got these, adjectives that help explain what the film is trying to elicit. But horror as its title, you can generalize it, but it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a psychological horror. And, you could have a horror film that has no gore, but then you could have a horror film that is pure gore, think like Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of thing.
Yeah, grindhouse cinema, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think they're very different. They're actually quite different films. And people will love to see psychological horrors, but then they would never want to watch a gore film because they're like squeamish of blood and that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, people just want to watch the gore because they're like, they've lived a life in so much pain. It's so they can never experience anything like that.
Yeah.
But then the psychological horror, they're hiding behind the sofa. So they're very different horror films, but you split them up. But at the same time, a film could be both. So why not say a game could be both an RPG and a simulation game?
Yeah, because I guess you could almost listen into the idea of like you can have an action game, but the strategy like elements to it, right? So you could have like I'm going to take an example here of Elden Ring, because we just talked about it. It's an open world sandbox simulation game that's predominantly action based, but you could say there's a degree of strategy in there in order to kind of get through your stuff. So like at that point, are categories for games even needed? If you get what I mean, like, do we just say,
I think they're still needed. They're still needed because, like, we'll come back to like the no one likes gore, but people like psychological horror thing.
But isn't that the idea of the PG or like the rating system?
No, but that's different though, isn't it? Like, that's if they say fuck in the film rather than because it's a film about racing. I think they're very different. Like, obviously, you need descriptors, right? But I think maybe we should stop saying it's got to be one or the other. You just kind of have an array of genres, whatever they could be, like these adjectives, and you put them in. And so when someone's looking at the film, they go, okay, it's an animation film which is a romance. Okay, and then you can go, okay, I like romance films and I like animation. It's a Pixar film. Okay, that's just like that's how it goes. But you don't have to say. But at the same time, you could like romance films, but not like animation, and so you go, I'm going to avoid that because I don't want an animation film as my genre, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But which is funny because it then comes to a different argument whether animation is actually a genre or it's just like the method of filming. But
yeah,
some sites determine it as a genre. I think Disney Plus determine it as a genre, so we'll just run with that for now.
Well, that's I mean, it's almost like a flavor versus like a categorization. But I think, yeah, no, it's interesting because back to your conversation around if it's like drugs of fear and stuff like that, it's classified as horror. But it's interesting. I'm looking at like the rating systems for different games here. And Peggy do like bad language, discrimination, drugs, fear, gambling, sex, violence, and online. But they also have an age rating. Well, like ESRB just has childhood, everyone plus 10, teen, mature, adults only. Like it's just.
But then if you go into how they categorize those, it will be exactly the same thing. They've just broadened it, make it simpler for people to understand. But I don't think that's like determines a genre because in no point there does it say it's a crime at all there. Like, yes, it is some things that could be a crime, right? Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's, I don't know anything about it being a detective film from any of those things you've given me, right? So, or games, right? But I think we need to come up with suitable adjectives that explain the film, and that's all we need to do. We don't need to go past that. And at the end of the day, I think like every country seems to have their own age rating anyway. And like as in obviously Europe and America have Peggy and ESRB, but Australia seems to be 10 times harsher than everyone else. They just straight up ban stuff straight away. Or they make games that are normally like a 15 in the UK into basically you can't buy in a shop basically in person. You got to order it online.
Really?
So. Well, because like games that like feature too much, like we go into like that age rating stuff, like this adult section, right? Is they'll just say, this isn't even, you literally can't buy this effectively. People have to like import it from elsewhere because they straight up ban, they just straight up ban stuff. But then, I mean, now we're getting into like government oversight on video games.
It's interesting because I didn't know they like ban stuff. Like the only game I'm looking at the moment that's kind of like streamed at me is there's 3, 4, 5 games so far that I've seen that are very weird. Like for instance, they've banned Wasteland 3 because it's like it's originally banned because of drug use in order to incentivize and rewards. I'm like, interesting. State of Decay, but banned because of drug use and incentive rewards. That's fine. Saints Row 4, fine. South Park: Stick of Truth, banned because scenes of sexual violence involving minors. Makes sense. Manhunt 2, that makes perfect sense. It's just like, it's interesting to look at some folks like BMX, Triple X, banned because of high impact sexual references. Yeah, it's just interesting. Like they haven't banned like a lot of games, but they banned enough to make me go interesting. Like Shell Shock 2's banned, Witcher 2 King of Assassins because of drugs again and nudity. Syndicate, Too Bloody, okay. Hotline Miami 2 Wrong Number, banned because of drugs. Devolver rating ahead. That's fine.
Well, actually, the overturn section is actually a bit more interesting. I'm looking at the Wikipedia article, but the overturn is much better. RimWorld was originally banned.
Oh.
RimWorld, very popular game, with people of actually quite a lot of ages, actually.
Yeah.
Disco Elysium, one of, yes, that's a very kind of like hardcore drama crime game, but at the same time, that's very popular. Things like We Happy Few, and drugs, that was, but that was, it's not even real. They weren't real drugs though, were they? Now, you could say, well, people got happy from taking the drugs and it means that it looks good. But at the same time, it's not like this is cocaine. This is going to make you really happy. Like it's completely different. And if you look at We Happy Few, it does not look like you would think, oh, that's going to be a banned game.
It's definitely weird because it's like a good example here. And this is a really funny one. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas had its classification revoked following the hot coffee controversy. edited worldwide of the game, so it didn't get that. Like, you're like, okay, it's a little interesting. Even Duke Nukem 3D was banned. And like Fallout and Left 4 Dead 2.
Doesn't this then become an argument for like technically you could call game development art an art form, right?
Yeah,
It
no,
is
definitely.
an art form. It's not. I'm calling it that. It is an art form. So since when was it acceptable to actually limit artwork? Right? It's not. I don't think it is. I don't think the government should have oversight on. I mean, yes, we're talking about like what is artwork now, but let's talk about. We're still talking about video games. So, should government oversight be able to destroy art? If Banksy wrote, Banksy has done quite a lot of stuff in the UK, very political art. If suddenly the government said, no, we're not going to allow any of this political art, we're going to prevent that. That is not good. There would be uproar about that, because it is about the freedom of expression. Now, there's obviously the argument is that, you can't be offending, you can't be offensive to people, right? And sure, Banks sticking it up on a public, wall, right? So we'll start pushing it a bit further, but these are games you have to buy and play if you want to be offended. So, it is you should be able to have the rating system and show, okay, this is what's in the game. It's probably not, good for this 12-year-old to be playing this 18 plus game. That's absolutely fine. I completely agree with that. But when it comes to outright banning, it shouldn't be allowed. And actually, at the end of the day, you could create rules to say the game can be sold for sure, but you can't advertise for it. That seems a bit better because you're advertising a game about drugs. You're not allowed to advertise drugs on TV in the UK, at least, right? I know America, sometimes it's a bit on the edge about, pharmaceutical companies can advertise wherever they want over there. But, here we don't even allow that. So,
yeah, but we don't. Alcohol is a drug, technically.
But in the UK, we have the whole policy that you got to basically say, drink responsibly. There's a whole load of rules there, but that's what I'm saying. You can keep those. That's good. You should be able to enforce those rules, make it so people are aware of the risk.
Yep.
Stop the advertising in a certain way. I mean, should alcohol be banned from advertising on TV? Maybe, but we're not talking about that today. So
no,
that's a different argument. But in terms of like video games, you can have the same rules for an 18 plus. You can't you can't show it on TV, but you can't have it on the front shelf either. In the UK we don't even allow tobacco to be shown. No, it's behind the counter. I mean, that's the kind of thing that maybe those are rules again put in place to protect people, but not outright banned. Otherwise, we would have just banned it.
So it's interesting you say that because I think Fallout 3 was advertised quite heavily, but that's classified as an 18 though, right?
It's a 15.
17 plus apparently.
I bet it depends what country because there's
Peggy 18. There we go.
Peggy 18. So I guess it depends what country, but also that's the thing. Like Oblivion though, Oblivion has 2 ratings. It's an 18 as well as a 15, depending on what platform it was on, right? So that also plays a part, it seems.
Yeah, it's just very weird. Is it like the accessibility of it, or just like what kind of quantifies it? Like, I don't know. And this is me kind of just thinking aloud here. Art's consumable to anyone, anywhere, as long as it's not, as you say, like discriminatory, shocking, or somewhat there. But like some artists do go for that shock factor. Like, in my opinion, I think it's like a Japanese robot, or I can't remember. It's like the robot that like pours its oil back into itself, but it's still leaking.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I think I think
like,
I do. Yeah.
I think that's like almost like if I was to give it an age rating, like almost like an 18 or a 16 piece of art, right? Because that's quite like weird to watch because it's like slowly getting slower. It's running out of fuel and like kind of stuff, but it's also trying to keep itself going. I don't know. But I would say it's sort of like I don't know how to say it, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that's like, I don't think that should be banned. Like, I don't think that's anywhere close to being banned. In fact, like that's kind of, a shot, like again, what is shock factor? Again, something that someone finds shocking, someone else won't. They'll just see, at the end of the day, a shock factor thing is meant to prove a point or trying to show something.
Yeah.
Grab attention of someone to show an issue. And usually these issues are either politicized or environmental, stuff like that. And sometimes, sometimes that works in art form. Obviously, people have the right to, in this country at least, to go out on the street and, and start marching. You can do that. Now, in theory, you should go tell the police you're going to do that. And then, you can, get protection, and then it's kind of authorized in some way. And, that's the way it's meant to work. But I don't see an issue with someone setting up an art piece somewhere on the side of a road or, overnight in a town centre. If they set it up, it's there. Well, it's not their land to put something up on, sure. So it can be removed. But like the Banksy stuff, that's never been removed. People, they try and put glass screens over it so it can't be taken away or changed or sprayed over or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I think people are more likely to, Banksy is one thing, but I guess, where does the line drawn between, I guess, vandalism then and trying to be a shock factor art piece?
And I think it's like I think it's maybe like down to taste or like accessibility to a degree, right? Because if I make I think probably a good game to probably relate to is like Postal, from what I've understood.
Mm-hmm.
That's got like a lot of shock factor, but a lot of people like it because it's just so obscenely out there. It's almost like a satire, but it's so heavy duty in the violence, the amount of stuff going on that everyone's like, oh geez, this isn't like a fair game.
Yeah, it's over the top. Yeah. But then again, just because if something's so over the top, then it loses its kind of like shock factor, right? Doesn't it, in some way?
Yeah.
Like, if you at some point, like we go back to the gore film kind of thing, if a film is just like outrageous, like, death scenes, and whatever, then it's not, yes, it's shocking, like when someone dies and you're suddenly surprised or whatever it might be, but actually you're not fearful of that ever happening to you because it's so outrageous or, it's just so unlikely to happen.
Yeah.
And so, so there is a limit to where it is. And so I guess if you're thinking about like a good game or a good horror film, it's got to, I guess it's got to hit that line where it's not too over the top, but it leaves all those surprises in to make it interesting and memorable to play.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I'm just trying to like think about it. It's just crazy when you like, I don't know, when you try and get everything like lined up, because I'm trying to like line up your points and then also line up the idea of like Postal 2, right? Which is like slapped, banned, horrible game. No one should ever play it. But then you have stuff like Duke Nukem, Doom, and I'm trying to think of the last one. What do you call it? Wolfenstein, like the new one. They're all hyper gore, but because it's seen as like, it sounds horrible, non-human killing, it's okay. Does that make sense? But the second, like, it's a little bit too close. Like, I think it's innocence, right? So a good example is Doom. It probably got a lower rating because you're killing demons, and that seemed to be okay. But stuff like the Modern Warfare 2 airport scene is shock factor because it's killing innocents. Like, I guess it depends on like what you're doing and the kind of the setting and the objective, right?
Yeah.
It's just interesting how that dictates like age rating and stuff like that.
At the end of the day, a human came up with those storylines, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And that's the thing, is that I guess if someone can do that, could someone then replicate it in real life? That's, I guess, like where you're like, are you trying to protect people from it? So like the No Russian mission in Modern Warfare 2. But at the same time, it's
you don't have to kill people.
Not everyone's a maniac. Well, not everyone's a maniac as well, like in real life.
Yeah.
And it comes down to, just because you see something in a game or a film, are you likely to replicate it? And I think the common sense answer is no, you're not. But of course, someone with exterior like problems beforehand could see that and think it's a good thing, like it's glorified.
Yeah.
Like, what is glorified and what is art?
Yeah, no, exactly.
What is just there to tell a story? Like and it's not up to John at the Age Rate Association board, whatever. It's up to the person playing the game, and it's about their reality of life and what they've lived through, and their state of mind. That's not the same for everyone. There's a limit to where someone will suddenly switch and then copy again. I don't think it's so minute. It's not something to say absolutely not at all.
Yeah. So if you were to do Age Rating, you'd base it purely on story and the actions within the story within the wider context.
Well, not every game has a story either, but
no,
it's about the goal. The goal. We'll come back to the goal-oriented thing, which I've determined every game must follow. Right? It's about the goals the game shows.
Yep.
Is the goal something that's suitable for that age range? So, for example, if I was making a game and the game was about selling drugs, okay, is that suitable for a 7-year-old person to play? No, it's not. And the obvious answer is their mind hasn't developed enough to realize right or wrong, even at that age. Yes, they still see some things, but you're introducing a new concept to them, which is this drugs. And if there's something a 7-year-old understands at that age, it's money. So you sell drugs, get money, it must be a good thing, right? Well, obviously that's not. Someone who's at least, their mind is more developed will see, you can get money loads of different ways. It doesn't mean you should go do it, right? And that's the difference between how you do age range, and it's a common sense answer.
So how would you address stuff like modern warfare? And I'm just interested here because obviously you're saying common sense is meant to dictate and stuff like that, but a lot of kids play that at a very young age. I'm aware the parents are kind of reliable to that to a degree, but at what point do you kind of draw the line and go, actually, this shouldn't be allowed?
Wait, what age can you join the army? 16, I believe.
Yeah.
16. So it should be 16. Modern Warfare.
Okay, that's fair. That makes sense. I guess Plants vs. Zombies is okay. I'm trying to think of like hot topic, kind of like controversial ones, but like...
I think cartoon. So most of the things, though, I have my own experience with age rating of video games because I've had to have something looked at and given an age range. And actually, funny enough, whenever you upload something to the Android store, you can get a free PEGI rating, I believe it's PEGI. You can get a free PEGI rating. Actually, it does a whole load of them, actually, but it definitely does a free PEGI rating. So if you're uploading a game or actually anything, you basically fill in a form and it basically tells you what it should be based on the information you've given it. Now, obviously, a lot of these like large releases on console and PC and whatever, these games are made by large companies. They obviously are then they pay PEGI and these other people quite a lot of money. Actually, it's in the thousands if you want it done properly, and they won't it's not filling in a form. Someone plays it and then determines based on the information the game company's given to them as well. But that form is a very simple way to determine it, and it is interesting. And funny enough, cartoon violence, no matter how small, you've obviously got to tell the truth when you're telling the forms. It goes without saying. You could say, the most minute cartoon violence. Suddenly, we'll skip it from what is technically could be a game played by a 4 or 5-year-old on an iPad, to actually something that's a 13 plus.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was looking at that as you were talking about it, and I used Cult of the Lamb as my example. Because realistically, you are running a cult. You are doing human sacrifice or animal sacrifices. I'm using air quotes here. And it's a 12 plus. I'm like, okay, that makes holistic sense because the style and look is that. But okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's probably a fair way of doing it.
But then again, it's how obviously again, it's up to the person filling the form at that stage. Really, obviously you can do it, and then someone looks at it later and reports you to PEGI, say this isn't this rating, and then it'll often get re-reviewed or it'll be investigated. But let's say I'm making a game like Mario Kart, right?
Yeah.
How much? There's quite a lot of cartoon violence is in Mario Kart, right?
Yes.
So you're saying no one but that's not the definition of cartoon violence.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
anything violent related, that's what it defines it as. And so, yes, it's not realistic violence. Obviously, I don't have a blue shell in real life, but, it's very possible that, a 4-year-old, I guess, sees it and goes, I'm going to throw banana skins everywhere so people slip over. Which, funny enough, is the same way to kill someone in Hitman. So, very different games.
Swings and roundabouts.
With that, but that's the thing. Like, obviously, you're not going to say you can only play Mario Kart above the age of 12. I think that's ridiculous. It's a very popular game with people under that age. In fact, it's one of the games people should be pushed towards at that age and not looked at. The actual violent games. Yeah. But that's the difference between cartoon violence. You can determine someone over the age of 7 is able to determine the difference between cartoon violence and real violence, right? That's why. I think it's probably it probably is a 3+, but it could be a 7 actually, Mario Kart. But that's kind of, again, it's this common sense thinking of, okay, this age range, they very clearly know the difference between between the two, and they are cartoon violence in itself is Mario Kart is the lowest form of cartoon violence from realism. So I think it's okay.
As well as like Tom and Jerry to a degree, right? Because apparently that's meant to be 5 to 8.
Yeah, exactly. Like Tom and Jerry, sure, what, all the traps, let's say, that, Jerry lays for Tom, all the like mallets that Tom pulls out to hit Jerry with, I could hurt someone in real life by hitting them with a massive mallet, right? But again, but it's that cartoon kind of like cat versus mouse game. Humans don't live, life day-to-day cat-mouse game. Obviously, some elements of life are a cat and mouse game, Some people's entire jobs are basically playing a cat and mouse game against people. Is that not what a whole police force does in some way? That's about fighting crime. But, it's an actual cat and mouse, and so it's very different.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we determined contextually everything should be age rating based depending on the level of violence or the context of your actions in the game, right?
Well, yes, we have agreed that this exists, but I don't think this detracts from the element of that you should also still have simulation and horror ratings on stuff separate to these age ratings, because they just still don't tell a story. But yes, I agree that you should still have age ratings.
Well, instead of genres, should you almost call them like flavors? Like this game has flavors of versus like a genre. Because I'd say genre is like it's a heavy category. Or is that just me?
Yeah, but is genre just not like... No, I think it's like how you define what genre is. Like, it's your own definition of it. Like, and it's like how... effectively, it should go into how in depth is someone going to list all the genres of a film. And, romance, comedy, like things can be switched over. Like romance, comedy, horror. Like, those 3 things can be a film, absolutely.
Scary movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's not to say, but someone can look at it and go, I really enjoy, comedy. And obviously they see horror and they're like, okay, but it's a comedy horror. So it's on the lighter side of it. Like, people can make informed decisions from, again, these descriptors.
Yeah.
So in other words, maybe we should just think of universal descriptors. And so no matter the medium, book, film, art, TV, game, we have these descriptors and someone's then much easier able to see it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of doing it. I don't know, personally, from a personal taste point of view, genres I find are very limiting to a game, because there's been some games in the past I'm like, I'm not into strategy games, I'm not into this type of game, I'm not into that type of game. You play it and you're like, okay, this is actually my thing. It just wasn't labeled correctly, I would say, or the genre was a little bit too heavy, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so maybe we should stop saying you should label it straight away as just horror, right? It should actually say whether it's a gore horror or psychological horror. Like, that's the kind of thing. If it's romance, is it, an adult romance kind of thing, or is it like, it's a minor, are you a cat dating sim? I don't know, like you're in a cat cafe and, people come in on dates. Like, that's technically a romance game, is it not? But it's different.
And here's one for you, just that's populated into my head. You make games.
I do.
You don't finish them, but that's a different story.
They're always a working. Nothing's ever finished in life.
Much like an artist.
Until the day we die. Yeah. Until the day we die, nothing's ever finished.
I have issues with games being categorized as an indie game versus a non-indie game. What are your thoughts on that? Because I would say some indie games are better than AAAs. Most AAAs are better than indie games, but also some AAAs are worse than indie games and have less content. What are your thoughts on that being used as a descriptor? Like, you can get... I'll take this as a good example, right? Okay. Plants vs. Zombie was classified as an indie game when it first came out.
Yeah, sounds fair.
and Fallout 76 is a AAA title.
Right.
However, I would say Plants vs. Zombie had a lot more like content in it than Fallout 76.
I don't think that's true. I think that's bizarre. I think
that was reaching. That was reaching.
I think I don't. It's not even reaching. You're out of the fucking atmosphere with this one. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, let me pick another topic. Graveyard Keeper.
Okay.
And
your definition, okay, by what I've just understood, by how you're giving these examples, your difference, your explanation and definitions are it's based on how much content there is in a game. That's how you seem to be defining an indie game. But that's not how I would define it, because an indie game could have more content than a AAA game in theory, right?
No, but that's what I said. Yep.
No, yeah, but your examples were false. But let's go with this, right? You are correct in saying a AAA, an indie game could have more content, or it feels like there's more to do. Okay. So Rust, for example, is an indie game.
Yep.
Okay. And obviously, when it started out, it was a small team, and the team have grown now. And it's still Facepunch Studios, and there's people there, right? But that doesn't make it a AAA, because they're always, self-funded as well in their own way. So, what is the actual definition? Well, I think it determines on what it is, but it sure as hell is not what content's in the game. It's primarily how they're funded, is my opinion. Yep. And if, for example, but then someone could say, oh well. If once you get to 20 people, you're no longer indie. You're a small studio, and maybe the term indie company is now just used too much. Yeah. And a team of 20 people, okay, I actually think a team of 20 people could actually still technically be an indie company based on the funding concept I'm running with right now.
Yeah.
But in reality, I think at some point there is a line where you just go, no, they're a small studio with private funding, and it's just kind of like, well, once upon a time, Blizzard were once an indie company. And at some point they crossed that threshold. Was it when they, merged with Activision? I probably not. I think probably before that was probably the case when they were, when they stopped being an indie company and were actually a small studio. But I think it's about funding. And I think some people, if it's a team of 2 people and they make a game, release it, and they make 1 million, let's say Stardew Valley, okay? Yep. Stardew Valley was in the works for years and years and years, single person, okay? Now, obviously, a team of people put it on console. They translate the code, and made it work on console. He didn't do that. Same with Terraria. Again, a studio did that. I think the original Minecraft was translated again by a second studio to go to the consoles.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean the person who made it stops being indie. The guy is making it's like a chocolate game or something like that. I don't know exactly the details, and I don't think anyone else really does either. But he's still making updates to Stardew Valley still as well. But he's made a lot of money, but he's still technically indie. But that's based on size again, and no one's bought him out. No one's this. He's not a publicly traded company. That is sure held me. Okay, for sure the line somewhere is if you're publicly traded, you're not an indie company. Yeah. Okay, that is completely out the way. That is definitely where a line exists. But the line definitely stops, but well before that. And it's when you start raising more money, privately, then you stop being. But I don't know if there is an actual definition. But for sure, the term indie company is thrown around too much for smaller studios. Rare, for example. Yeah. I don't know when, actually, have Rare ever been an indie studio? Well, I guess you could call. Well, how many people started when they, the first Rare game? I don't know. But they've always been in my eyes a small studio. Obviously, they're owned by Microsoft, so they're definitely not. Yeah, if you're owned by a larger corporation, then you're not an indie studio.
But you could be funded buy them, but you could just still have 10 people working. Oh no,
no, that's different. They actually own it though. They own share, like Microsoft own that because they bought that studio, right? There's difference between like me, a developer going to a publisher and then publishing my game. That doesn't stop me from being an indie studio anymore. That's still there because you can obviously I could have still self-published, right? But at the same time, being published officially doesn't stop you being indie. But at some point, if they're like, okay, we're going to buy your whole company and we own you now, then you're not indie anymore. You're owned by someone else. Yeah. So yeah, I think when you start selling shares of your company, that's 100% when. It's easy to. This is the thing. Sometimes it's easy to determine when something's not it than actually saying what it is, right? This is one of those cases because I don't think there is a single definition, but it's very easy to say when it's not an indie company.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not how much content is in the game, because it's like I could put 1,000 monkeys in a room, and at one point they might create Tetris, right? But that doesn't stop it, 1,000 monkeys, that doesn't mean an indie studio. Surely you've got 1,000 people working on the game.
Yep.
But, at the same time, it doesn't matter. Tetris isn't going to beat Stardew Valley or even Plants vs. Zombie, maybe.
Yeah, no.
But the Battle Royale Tetris, that 100% does, for sure.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Which sadly is shut down now. Tetris 99, I think it was called.
Tetris 99 was horrible.
I just don't think you're very good at it, but that's fine.
True, I'm not good at battle royales. That's my weakness in life.
Genre battle royale, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the genre battle royale is very generic. That's why you said descriptive versus as a thing. I had a really good analogy game actually. I can't remember what it's called, Mighty Number 8 or something like that, and Mega Man was the two examples I was going to use of big studio and indie air quotes, or Bloodstained or. What's it called? I want to say Moonlighter, but that's the wrong one. Hollow Knight, and then Metroid, and then Castlevania. Because that's two indie games, and then two AAA titles. So it's just interesting. Do you still think indie has the negative connotations with it, or do you think it's almost better now to be an indie game than a AAA title?
Indie companies should stop calling themselves indie companies. No one cares. Literally, no one actually cares whether the game's made by one person or not. They care if the game's fun.
But then there's stuff like indie
I think
game
it's actually
awards,
detriment. Right? Okay, but that you can. Okay, yeah, what I mean is, you shouldn't advertise. What I mean is your sole marketing strategy should not be look at me, I made this game by myself, and I'm an indie company, and I made this. I think there's actually more negative connotations.
Yeah,
I think it's very hard nowadays because it's different age ranges appreciate different forms of game art, right? Let's say, by game art I mean the art of making games. Okay. So someone 10 years ago, maybe even longer, that would have appreciated more. Someone who in their garage made 20 years ago, someone would have appreciated in their garage someone made this game. Yep. Okay. And you even have those storylines where someone, developed the game in their bedroom or their kitchen table. RuneScape, for example, at the time, was made in his family home, and when the guy was at Cambridge, right? That's very good. And then it got bigger, and then he was able to, actually branch out and actually get an office and stuff like that. And that's the story of how that went up. And I mean, the story of how Jagex, were formed and went up, very interesting. There's a very good documentary on it. When RuneScape hit 20 years old, they made a massive documentary on it, and it's very good. But all three brothers, I think maybe even one still owns part of the game. The others sold off. So it's all very kind of different there. But I think back then it was appreciated more. But now, even now, people don't care. And yes, Steam is, but this is now, this makes even more sense why people don't care, is because there's so much now more marketing to try and show games off that are indie, because there's so many of them, and actually people don't buy them normally. So things like these, the Steam, Steam now do it used to be twice a year, it's now 4 times a year. They do this whole, demos where everyone can play demos and stuff. I think there's someone just finished a while ago, a couple of weeks ago maybe. But, the next one's going to come up in October, I think it is. And people can submit their game, and people download demos. And Steam's front page shows it off. It forces people to go to get these smaller games. And the reason is because Valve make tons of money off the the 30% they take of all these games that people purchase. And because people are probably likely still to buy one large game than they are to buy 3 smaller games in a month.
That's fair.
Now, yes, people may still buy multiple large games or just multiple games in general because either they have lots of money or they have no money because they just don't know when to stop buying games. And that's like the limit of where it is. But that doesn't mean that it's not about what's an indie game. No one appreciates that anymore. It's about the gameplay. And if the gameplay is not good, and actually most of the time, indie games, they have absolutely no idea how to market their game whatsoever.
Yeah.
They make the worst possible trailers ever. I've done small trailers for like game jam stuff we've done before, smaller things I've done, and they're not good. Like, I'll be honest, they're not good trailers, but it's not because, it's a lack of effort. It's just because you, as a sole person, focus on the wrong things. Because you've made the game in your own eyes, no one else has really looked at it, and so you think you're marketing it to yourself, and that's wrong. That's what indie games like to do. You need to market it to a mass audience.
Yeah,
and that's where a lot of indie games go wrong. Is how they market their game,
and
they market it to people like them, and in reality, the indie game developers they're quite niche in what they enjoy. It's like, because here's an idea, okay? And this is how I think of games. I don't make all games like this, but let's say I was doing a game, you told me this weekend you need to make a new game. You have until the end of the weekend.
Yep.
Okay, which I used to do all the time. And I still do occasionally. I haven't done one in the last year, which I still need to do. But, the game jam is exactly like that. I think it's very possible I'll probably think of something out the box. That's what I'll do. I'll make something so niche because I'm trying to impress you with the use of my time, because I need to make something so interesting that you look at it and go like, there's thought that went into this, and then you kind of forget that it took 48 hours to make in some way, right? And it could be it's a cooking game, where you have to make food. You put food on in the pan and it fries, and then you put it on a plate and you put it in a place. Okay, but at the same time, you need to go out back and stop a zombie horde in your kitchen at the same time. So you need to fulfill the orders that you're given to you
game, or is that
while fighting.
RPG?
Well, I don't know, but it's like such a niche game, because effectively what I've done is I've made a zombie game and added cooking. But you see how I started? I started with the cooking design because that was like the theme we went with, and so. Which bit do I focus on? There's 2 genres there, cooking and horror and action, probably as well, from shooting the zombies or whatever. Right, or maybe just hit them with a frying pan, so it's cartoon violence, so therefore I don't have to go up to a whole 10 age range from people. That's like a game that probably could be made in 48 hours. Obviously it'd be tough on the artwork, but the actual coding is probably is nonsense. I reckon that's pretty straightforward to do.
Yeah. Do you think people, and this is, I'm not trying to stop you mid flow, by the way, do you think people maybe use indie as like a crutch to hold on to? Like if someone
they think it's worth more than it is.
No, it's like a weird one, right? So if you come out with a AAA game, I go, that's terrible, but then you told me, it's made by a small studio or 3 or 5 people. Do you think I'm more likely then, or like the general population is more likely to then go actually it's pretty good for an indie? Do you get what I mean? No?
Because let's take it this way, okay? I put 20 people in a room, okay? They're all adults. Okay. And I tell them, you need to make me the best finger painting that that I have ever seen, okay? So I leave them in a room for an hour. I then get 3 children around the age of 5, 3 to 5. And I say, you need to make me the best finger painting. Yep. Okay. Now, the likelihood is both are crap, right? Okay. They're not going to be good because the tools I gave them are their fingers, right? And they ran out of paint. I forgot colors. There's just one color. There's whatever, right? Okay. Now, they're both, it's rubbish. Okay. Now, if you put them side by side and you tell me which one's better, No, you say, are you going to buy either of these? Okay, and put them on your wall forever. I'm going to tell you, no, I'm not. And if you turn to me and go like, well, think of the 3 children that made this, that's not going to affect me. It's still garbage. It doesn't make it better. It still looks like rubbish. It's the taste test, though, isn't it? It's a taste test situation, okay? Is if you put 2 games in front of someone, you don't tell them who they're made by, okay? Yeah. At the end of the day, you're going to say, which one did you more enjoy? And the person's going to do that based on what they enjoyed. Now, yes, it could be better and there could be reasons for that. But at the end of the day, people enjoy games for different reasons. So again, it's very subjective. It doesn't really matter. But you could say, okay, do you think, how would you rate these games out of 10 of all games, of a game of all time? Okay. If you were IGN, what rating would you give it? Okay. And if they both give it a 3, okay, and you go, oh well, that was made by 3 people. That doesn't change the rating you gave it. It's still a 3 out of 10, right?
Yep.
So I guess it depends like on the person, but I think like if the person, it's like, oh no, I will play this. I will continue through this painful game because it's made by 3 people instead of Blizzard, which are basically the same people at this stage because everyone has left. But you know, it's basically the same. It doesn't make a difference to me. And I don't think it should. But I do think people hold on to the term indie and think it's worth gold, and it's not worth anything. Okay. I think all they think about is people who've done well, and it's because the people you remember in gaming, like the game developers you remember, the rock stars of game development, okay, they come from the smallest parts, you know, they come from those small games because they have the best stories to tell about themselves, right? Not about the games themselves, right? So that's why like Indie Game the movie was so interesting because the people behind it have personalities for better or worse, especially the people in that, right? Now, if you turn to me and go, here's Blizzard, right? If you look at like the videos that Blizzard do for World of Warcraft, where it's like they sit down, you know, whenever they're trying to like release a patch or like as Dragonflight was coming out, it was the most like scripted, pointless chat, like roundtable discussion I've ever seen. Yep. They might have well not done it because it was so pointless. There was no flavor, there was no personality. Okay, I don't remember any of those people in that video whatsoever. Okay, I do know the game director and I know the producer because they have personality and they've actually shown it and they can express themselves. It's the Todd Howard, okay? Yeah. But the thing is, with Starfield that's coming out, the only reason people know Todd Howard for all these games is because he's the only one who's allowed to talk. Oh. Well, he's a meme in some way, but Pete Hine, the PR director of Bethesda, he talks occasionally, and that's why he's known. But he's not going to be known to the average person. People who know Skyrim aren't going to think first of Pete Hine, the PR guy. They're going to think of Todd Howard because he's the only face they've really seen Bethesda, and that's the thing, and that he's the rock star of it. But that doesn't mean he's the best person in the company either. He's just in charge, and he's just the only person who can talk about it. And you know, when you're the only person who can talk about a game because you made it, you're going to be more well known. But that doesn't mean it's a better game because you got a small team. I think, arguably, in theory, the less people you have, the fewer people you have working on a game, the worse it is. In theory, if you like, as in that's the theory. That's not truthful. That's the theory, right? More people who work on a game, it means it should be better. But at the same time, that's the theory, right? But it's not true. It doesn't work out that way. And it's about like maybe indie gamers, because there's such a small team or it's one person, and because they have ultimate control of their game, they then don't have this kind of too many cooks situation, and therefore the game's better. Maybe all these AAA companies, they make bad games because too many people had a say in how it was made.
Agreed, but I think a lot of people come to it with like prejudged in terms of games. So if like, for instance, I'm going to play a AAA title, I expect it to be worth the £50 kind of mark. Like to your analogy, there's some people who pay £15 for 3 games, and there's someone who pays £45 for a single game, right? Yeah. If I pay £15 for one game, I'm going to be less infuriated that it doesn't work off the bat. And a good example I'm going to use, and please take this with a pinch of salt, because I know we talked about this before and you get very irate in it, which is absolutely fine. Day of release, I'm going to take Divinity. Okay, let me take with the AAA game first, right?
Okay.
No Man's Sky came out. It was, yeah, no, I'm sorry. It was £50 off the bat. That game was abysmal, and everyone wrecked it because it was like, it's had so much money, it has so much thing. It's a AAA game, and everyone ripped into it because it was so bad and so horrible. But there's also been car crashes of indie games where people have gone, oh, it's fine, it's an indie game, give it time, or like, oh, to be fair, only 3 people have worked in it, I'm not that worried about it. Like, I think there is like an unconscious bias to a degree, because I've seen it before in the workplace where someone's like, oh, who the hell did this, blah, 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 blah. Oh, it's blah, blah. They're quite young. Oh, okay, that's fine then. But like, I'm not saying it's a good thing, by the way. I'm just saying I think there's like an unconscious bias towards the idea of either like ages when you're doing stuff, or like if it's an indie or not. Like, people are more lenient if it's an indie and it has some bugs and some kinks.
Yeah, but do you know what it comes?
You go for it.
Do you know what it comes down to? It's not about the indie or the actual company. It's about the pricing that you paid for it, right? That's ultimately what you're saying. Okay, it was less expensive than paying £70 these days for a AAA game. Is normal. And if you buy one £15 game and it turns out you play it for hundreds of hours and you find loads of use in it, and then you buy a £70 game and you only play it for 10 hours, then obviously you're going to go, well, the better value was the game I played more. But at the same time, someone who just plays Call of Duty all day, they're going to play that £70 and they're going to have hundreds and thousands of hours in a game that you only spent 10 hours in because you enjoy, playing like a survival game, theme game that you spent £15 on. And again, it's but it's a sandbox, and maybe indies is better at making. Maybe indies just make sandbox games, and that's why people love like indie games, because there's the element of actually simplicity in it, and it's not overly complex. It's not sometimes it's not even really refined, and people love games that, like, some people are like, I only play games that have refined and they don't have all this kind of nonsense in it. But then an indie game, maybe they're going to take shortcuts because they're an indie game, developer, and it allows people more freedom to play the game, and there's more quirks, and people like those quirks. And then they'll say, oh, I'll fix that quirk, and then the whole community, because they've built a community, because they're much more down to earth than some of these AAA companies, will go, no, don't fix that. We're all used to it. We like it. And those are you don't hear about those stories really in AAA games where fair. The community say no, please keep this bug in, because usually it's not a quirk to keep in. It's generally like just poorly tested or developed.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And then I think probably just to kind of wrap up my point on like indie versus AAA is like reviewers still review them differently, or like they're on the same playing field from a review aspect.
They shouldn't. No, they should be absolutely the same.
You get what I mean? But like some reviewers don't do that. They'll be like, oh, for an indie game, this is perfect, 10 out of 10. But then they'll give like, I don't know. Trying to think of a game here. Stellaris, like a 7 out of 10, because you know what? It didn't really capture the sci-fi 4X thing I wanted it to. But I don't know. Dr. Do's wizarding internet game Finanza, where it's a 4X on the internet. It was made by 2 guys. It was pretty good, and it had everything that ticks boxes. 9 out of 10. Do you get what I mean? Or am I just rambling?
It's the price. No, because then again, it's like, what's in it? Again, like, I think it's just pricing, really. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many people made the game. It's about the price you pay and the thing you get out of it. And, maybe, again, actually, you've said, we said this earlier, actually, about the reviews, and I brought up the rating system first, but I probably shouldn't have done, is that games then shouldn't be rated with a number, because it's arbitrary. It doesn't mean anything. My 7 out of 10 is different to your 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
And so someone could listen to me and I go, oh, it's a 7 out of 10, and go, oh, okay, that's not bad. And then you give it a 7 out of 10, but you're like giving it a 7 out of 10 because the 3 points you're missing are because you didn't like the graphics of the game, but actually it's stylized, and I think that doesn't matter, like it's meant to be like that. And so like it's so arbitrary. So really, they shouldn't be a rating like at all, a numbered rating at least. They should just be people who enjoy this, like pros and cons. That's what it should be. I want bullet points. When I go look for like software I need for something, the sites I always like find and actually are helpful. Like if I was looking for like new pedals and steering wheel recently. Okay. The site I found helpful was one that listed a whole load of them in no particular order and just showed pros, cons. Here's our recommendation. The recommendations relating back to the pros and cons of all of the 3 things above it are because this is better for a mid-level. For the pricing, it's much better. And there you go. The keyword is pricing, value. The value rating is what it is, basically.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think is it qualitative? That's like descriptions? Qualitative? Yeah, qualitative.
Yeah.
Data is a lot better. Like, I don't know about you. I watch, if a new game comes out, I watch Gamer Ranks, I think.
Yeah.
Because I find their stuff better because they're like, oh, this is the game. This is what I think of it. Like, a good example is I watched it for... Oh, what did I watch it for recently? I watched it for... Final Fantasy 16, and I watched it for the entire time, and I was like, this is really good because it's kind of got going, I really like this, I don't like this, I like this, I'll buy it or I won't buy it. Like, I prefer that style of game rank, which is like great, but I hate IGN, which is like, oh, the game's really done well, it's got a lot of good graphics, the storytelling is really powerful, 6. And you're like, how did we get to this number? Like, because I don't know about you, I find sometimes, like you said, quantitative data is good for comparison, but the issue is if the same person's not comparing it each time, it's absolutely like dog and it's not going to work out, right?
Yeah.
So I completely agree.
Yeah, I think people relate to different things, and are we ever going to get rid of rating systems out of numbers? No, of course we're not. And again, every single magazine, online, whatever media will rate things differently. There's no consistency for it. Okay. So unless you have one body that rates games and has it on a set criteria for every single game, then everyone else's opinion doesn't matter. And people should listen to people they listen to. And actually, do you know what? I'm not saying you shouldn't go for reviews. Okay, reviews exist for a reason, and I'm a big advocate for listen to reviews because they help you determine whether you think you enjoy it. But that's not to say that you just go find any review. People should go find reviewers that they trust with their opinion, and it should be because they've rated games previously in line with what you believe.
Agreed. Yes.
And that's why people, unfortunately no longer, but people like Total Biscuit, when they were making their reviews, WTF is, okay, it wasn't a rating system. It was literally, what is it? This qualitative data about what he thought. And someone who didn't like TB would have just been like, oh, I don't agree with him. And that's fine. You're not going to go watch his videos to find out whether you like a game. That's fine. Someone who does enjoy the games that TB did, and actually TB rated a lot of different games, and he just rated some far out ones there he would never play. Like, I remember one time, but he got like pre-access to The Sims 4 many, many years ago when it first came out. Is TB a Sims 4 player? Absolutely not. But he did it with his wife, and it was great content. And his actual opinion was there's nothing like she knew more about The Sims than him, but because they were both together, he had his kind of way to explain it. Oh, so there's not hardly anything in the game compared to the last Sims. And she's like, yeah. And so and someone who understands his way of explaining games is much more likely to get out of it than someone who doesn't. So find someone you trust with their opinion and listen to them about it. And, if someone says they don't like a game, that doesn't mean you don't have to like it. That means you shouldn't not play it if you don't agree.
Agreed.
And I think that's the way it should be. And rating systems are bullshit, so ignore them.
So rating systems are bullshit. Categories are bullshit. Genres are bullshit. So basically, the establishment is a lie. Do what you want on qualitative descriptions of people you trust, basically.
Yeah. Exactly.
Agreed.
Exactly. It all comes down to that. Reality is what you make of it.
Yes.
That's my.
Isn't that a Bill Cipher quote from?
That's my quote of the day. I don't know. It could be anyone. Quote of the Anonymous. Unknown.
Pretty sure it's
Unknown
Bill
soldier.
Cipher.
I don't know.
Okay. I think that's a good place to end it, no?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, fun.
Yeah, I liked it. 10 out of 10.
I liked it. That's good content.
You didn't even enjoy my meme at the end where I said, that's good, 10 out of 10.
Oh. Were you still recording? You could cut this
it's
bit.
fine. I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect because you went, yeah, that's great, cool.
I'll bring it up on the next podcast. I was listening back to the podcast. I realised you said 10 out of 10.